Good morning and welcome to the first session of today's webinar. My name is Aranza Zugalan and I'm a member of the Build Up editorial board. Build Up is Europe's largest international portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. It is a unique community that provides the opportunity to discuss, contribute, and collaborate with other experts in these fields. Build Up aims to bring together stakeholders working in the building sector to re-up the collective intelligence about energy reduction in buildings by encouraging knowledge exchange. Our editorial board is organized around the topic of the month, which allows us to dig deeper into specific themes. Each month, several items are produced by Build Up, such as overview and technical articles and infographics, but that's not all. Build Up also offers the opportunity to host webinars on topics related to energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. More recently, Build Up has opened the opportunity to distinguished experts in the field to share their knowledge in front of our cameras in our Build Up expert talks. The Build Up portal shares daily the most relevant events in the field of energy efficiency and renewable energy. But we also participate actively in many European events around the year, such as EPB Center and RIBA conferences, Horizon 2020 Interreg and Cost Action events, Covenant of Mayors, and more, with the aim of further disseminating the results and helping to create high-quality media content. The Build Up portal is updated daily, reaching around 120 new items each month, including news, events, publications, articles, and video content. But Build Up is not only us. Build Up is a community, and we invite you to be part of it. By becoming a member, you can contribute by uploading your own content and promoting your news, events, case studies, reports, and more. By contributing content, Build Up will help you to reach a broader audience through our online portal, our social media channels, and our monthly newsletter. Please visit us as www.buildup.eu to find out more. It is a pleasure for Build Up to host the second webinar of the Circular Talks webinar series entitled Let's Talk Circular, Social and Affordable Housing, brought to you by the Drive Zero project. This double webinar session aims to unravel how circular principles are used in social and affordable housing today, asking important questions such as what are the current challenges, what are the good practices, or what should be changed in the EU policy framework. The first session this morning, entitled Supplying Circularity for Social and Affordable Housing, will investigate the market readiness of circular solutions by assessing if there is a fit between products, circular construction or renovation solutions, and the market with social housing companies. The session this afternoon will give the opportunity for some of the early adopters of circular processes to showcase their work to EU policymakers and to provide feedback on the current direction and scope of the EU policy with regard to upscaling and mainstreaming circularity with the residential housing sector. For this morning agenda, we will first hear from today's moderator, Dara Turnbull, Research Coordinator at Housing Europe. We will then be welcomed and introduced to the Drive Zero project by Cecilia Mazzoli, Assistant Professor at the University of Bologna, Department of Architecture. This will be followed by an introduction to circular business from Elettra Agliardi, full professor at the University of Bologna, Department of Economics. Following Electra's presentation, we will have a short poll on the topic of uptake circular solutions in social and affordable housing, moderated by Dara Turnbull. After the poll, we will hear from Targo Calamis, a full professor at the Tallinn University of Technology, on the pains and gains of using circular solutions in apartments associations. After Targo, Eero Niguman, a project manager at Timbeko, will present Timbeko's circular business model. For the last presentation, Bart Boortman, Innovation Project Coordinator at Weibo, will take the floor to present Weibo's circular business model. To round off the morning session, there will be a discussion session on how to better supply circular to social and affordable housing providers, which will also be moderated by Dara Turnbull. We invite the audience to send us questions through the GoToWebinar platform that can be answered during the discussion session at the end. Please specify which presenter the question is for, or if it's for all of them. We remind you that you will be able to find the recording on the Build Up portal and on our YouTube channel in the coming days, together with the presentation slides. This morning session is going to be moderated by Dara Turnbull from Housing Europe. Dara, I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you very, very much for the introduction. I won't keep you too long because you're here to hear the speakers, but very quickly just to introduce you to Housing Europe. I'm sure many of you on the call this morning already know Housing Europe, but for those of you who don't, we are the European Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing Providers. You see some figures here. So at a local level, we represent approximately 43,000 providers of primarily affordable and social and cooperative housing. So we have a very, very rich network, both inside and outside the European Union, that really captures a broad cohort of the population within Europe. And we estimate that today we represent about 10 to 11% of the entire European housing stock. So yeah, we are an important organization. We are an organization which in recent years has been at the forefront of the transition towards a more circular economy, something we'll hear a bit more about in the second session after lunch. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker of the day. This first speaker is Cecilia Mazzoli, Assistant Professor at the University of Bologna, who will give us an overview of the Drive Zero project. So Cecilia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dara. Just okay, just to be sure to have the control of okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being connected to this webinar. My name is Cecilia Mazzoli, and I'm a researcher at the Department of Architecture of the University of Bologna. As a partner in the Drive Zero consortium and a co-organizer of this webinar series, today I will briefly introduce you the Drive Zero project and its goals. So let's go, sorry, to the second slide. The Drive Zero project is funded by the European Union under the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Action Program. It started in October 2019 and it will end in late December 2023. So at this stage, we can say that we have already achieved several results, both intangible and tangible, in terms of building demonstrators, as we will see later in the different presentations. In line with the European Green Deal's goal of achieving climate neutrality in Europe by 2050, and the strategy promoted by the Renovation Wave, the Drive Zero project deals with the promotion of strategies for the decarbonization of the existing building stock through the implementation of a deeper renovation intervention. So according to the Drive Zero approach, circular retrofitting is based on the use of energy from renewable sources and the use of materials from biological or technical cycles, in which waste production is minimized and the end-of-life strategies with a positive impact on the environment are envisaged. Okay, so the project is coordinated by OCHE Installati Advisors, and the consortium consists of about 20 partners from different target groups, in which we have academic and research institutions, industries, architectural design firms, and umbrella associations, including Housing Europe, which organized this webinar together with Unibo. So this is the team. Well, one of the main research questions for the development of the project is this: why is a circular approach needed in architecture? As you already know, the topic of sustainability and circularity is increasingly central and relevant today. In fact, in most manufacturing sectors, we are seeing a process of transition from a linear to a circular economy model to try to achieve the goal of the European Green Deal. This slide shows the statistical data that support the need to make this transition also in the building sector. So we see that buildings, as you know, are responsible for 30% of total energy consumption in the European Union. 60% of the energy used throughout the life cycle of a building is the so-called embodied energy, the gray energy, which is the total energy that is used to produce a material or product, including mining, manufacture, and transport. Also, 50% of the materials extracted in Europe are from buildings, and 25 to 30% of the total waste generated in the Europe framework comes from construction and demolition processes. So this is the statistic data that basically boost the innovation in this field. Going to the other slide, so shifting to the main objectives of the Drive Zero project, the project aims, sorry, I go, okay, too fast. The project aims to promote the adoption of a circular approach in renovation processes, which in order to be attractive and effective must be based on real customer needs. This approach is based on the reuse and recycling of locally available materials through urban mining processes and the use of renewable and environmentally friendly materials. Then another important goal concerns the development of new consumer-centered business models that, as we will see from my colleague Professor Agliardi's presentation, enable the transition to circular economy processes. In addition to the achievement of technical innovation goals, a key aspect relates to providing clear and accessible information and increasing awareness in the field of energy performance for the building's occupants to be renovated. And in general, for all citizens that are non-expert in the field. Last but not least, the project is testing the developed innovative construction products and systems, as well as the circular strategies on 7 selected demonstration buildings located in 7 different countries belonging to the consortium. So more precisely, Estonia, Greece, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, Slovenia, and Spain. Here you can see the location of the pilot cases and a picture of the pre-renovation state. All the buildings were selected because they are representative of a typical building typology in the country, and therefore they have a high potential for the replicability, for the reiteration of circular renovation actions. So this was very important for the project. Today, you will see the presentation of the innovative facade system developed by the industry Weibo for the Dutch pilot, that is number 1, and also the renovation intervention developed for the Estonian pilot, number 5, which will be presented by the industry Timbeco and Taltech, the University of Taltech. What about the other demos? In the first webinar of the Circular Talk series held on 28 March, which was co-organized by Unibo and Architects Council of Europe, we have presented the Italian and the Irish pilot case. So today we will present the Dutch one and the Estonian, and I invite you to attend the third and final webinar of the series that will be organized by Unibo and by UIPI. So that is the International Union of Property Owners. Yeah, so I invite you to scan this QR code and where you can find more information, and you can register to the event. In this webinar in particular, the Slovenian, Greek and Spanish cases will be presented. Furthermore, if you want to physically visit some demonstrators, we have organized 2 events. The first one is in Dublin, which will be held on 11 May for the Irish pilot in the framework of the conference Accelerating Deep Energy Retrofit in Housing Through Modular and Circular Solution. That is a conference organized by the Technological University of Dublin in cooperation with Coady Architects, Vision Built, and in association with the Housing Europe. And then we have another event that will be held in Bologna on 25 May for the Italian pilot in the framework of the renovation tour, which UIPI and the Architects Council of Europe, together with Unibo, are now organizing. To conclude, for any curiosity and insights about Drive Zero, you can follow the news on all these web and social channels. So I invite you to visit them and to keep updated, keep you posted about the innovation. And well, I thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the webinar. I leave the floor to my colleague, Professor Agliardi. Thank you.
Okay, good morning to everybody, and thanks a lot, Cecilia, for your kind introduction. And as was already explained clearly by my colleague, let's say one of the pillars of the European Green Deal, and I would say a priority policy in the European Union, is circular economy. As we know, could you please shift it to the next? Okay, thanks. Okay. As you know, in the Green New Deal, it is stressed among the important pillars the necessity of mobilizing industry in a circular way, and together with the other important objectives, which are around increasing the ambitions, the climate ambitions of the European Union, of course. So circular economy is seen as a way to promote a much needed shift toward sustainable development. And for that, which is also stressed, for example, in the action plan for renovation wave, again, here we already have another pillar which is crucial in terms of circularity, together with health and well-being, energy efficiency, the possibility of having, let's say, resilient climate objectives in order to avoid climate risks, but still among the crucial pillars, circularity is already stated. So circularity is a key objective, and at the same time, if we wanted to implement circularity, this requires for particular companies to change the way they operate, and therefore the adoption of a circular business model. In my presentation, I'm just going to give you a short introduction in order to focus on the key elements that are necessary in order to implement the circular business models. And then you will see during, in particular, this webinar, various case studies, various testimonials, experience, in particular good practices, which have been implemented by our partners in the Drive Zero project. So let's start just with a very quick introduction. As I said, if you wanted to implement circular economy, the move is to introduce innovation in the type of business models which is used. We usually use this expression, business model innovation, which basically means that you have to start thinking of changing the way you do business more than what you do in your business. And in particular, let's say that probably in general, we can think that this means that you have to introduce technical innovations. Let's say that technical innovation is often probably misunderstood as the only type of innovation that we need once we talk of circularity. It is true that technology-based invention and innovation are crucial, and we see also today in terms of new products, in terms of new services, in terms of new materials which have to be used. But I would say that it is an iterative process initiated by perceiving a new market or a new service opportunity for a technology-based innovation, but then this has to go step by step with social innovation as well in companies, in terms of a process which encourages new solutions, new processes, in order also to meet the social goals, while at the same time changing behaviors and leading to new capabilities and let's say new relation to better use of assets and resources. So I would say that we need the technological innovations, we need the social innovations in companies and societies, of course, to go together with the awareness of consumers, of users, and this will become very clear, especially in the second part of our webinar today. But this has to go step by step together with business model innovation. And we will see it in particular in the notion of product as a service in a couple of minutes. The other thing which we have to bear in mind is that business model innovation is a complex concept. If you want, it's also not completely well defined. It's a little bit ambiguous if you want, but that comes from its complexity because it affects all stages. It affects the product design, production and distribution, use, end of life, and also the characteristics of the products in terms of longevity, durability. We will see also this. So that means that we have to take into account different aspects, a sort of more comprehensive viewpoint, someone will say an ecosystem point of view in terms also of the changes in the organization of the companies. And at the end of the day, we also need policy enablers that should support business model innovation by providing adequate laws, adequate regulations, of course, financial support, economic incentives, and other policies that allow us to have successful circular business models. Of course, there are already some established legislative measures, but others are in the process. We already have regulated energy efficiency and some circularity features of energy-related products. We are in the process of providing a taxonomy for circularity as well in the European Union, but still we have a lot of barriers and difficulties encountered by companies, and this again would become clear in today's presentations also by our partners. Please, next slide. Okay, just 2 words, because as I said, the idea of business model in general is a little bit ambiguous. There are no specific definitions. At the same time, since 2012, when the Academic Foundation framed the circular economy as a business opportunity, since then, business and research interest in the circular business models concept has rapidly increased, and therefore there are different definitions, different studies, and what we also did in our work within Drive Zero was to have a very comprehensive taxonomy and the work of classification, which was preliminary put in effort in our studies. Anyway, just for a big audience, let's say what we mean by the expression business model. It's basically a conceptual tool which we need to understand our company, define its strategies, of course its market strategies, through the design of products and services it offers, and how it differentiates from the other companies, and how it integrates in its value chain with the other companies. And by business model innovation, as I already said, we have to think of a change in the way we do business in order to implement a circular economy on the organizational level. So it's a key leverage for that. And in particular, when we study the way to implement circular economy, we have to rethink and in particular try to build new specific practices in terms of what we call value proposition, value capture, value delivery, and value creation. And I will make much more precise now what we mean with this expression. So in general, I just wanted to anticipate that the circular business model becomes crucial to meet our ambitions, of course, environmental ambitions, but also social ambitions, by leveraging circular solutions. And the objective is also to build a company where performance is improved in terms of financial performance, environmental performance, of course, but also social performance and resilience to the exposure to risk coming from, in particular, climate change and the environment. Next slides, please. I just mentioned these expressions, value proposition, value creation, delivery, and value capture, and I want here just to make a little bit more clear in which way the circular business model may become a type of sustainable business model to integrate environmental and economic value creation. And this can be done, in particular, focusing on value proposition, which means essentially the way product and services are offered. So the idea that in our shift toward circular economy, we need to maximize consumer use of products. So the focus is more on use rather than on ownership. So the users do not necessarily need to own physical products, but our purpose is to maximize use. And this would be done through services, products, and of course, ways of aligning in a better way manufacturers and consumers' interests. At the same time, by value creation and delivery, we talk about the product and service offering and delivery via the internal resource capabilities. Here, in particular, we have to focus on the redesign for durability, repairability, and upgradability, because the idea, as I said, is also to work on the characteristics of products, and at the same time, to have the supply chain much more integrated. And in terms of value capture, again, consumer will pay for the use of the service, not for the ownership of products. So often we have to think of new contracts which allow us to try to shift the importance on the use, as I said, and on the performance. And I'm going to that a little bit more specifically now. So the idea is that you have to enable consumers to access also products, services which are very expensive, and in this way you may expand the market potential of new innovations. So the logic, please next slide, is to have a type of business model, next slide please, that allows us to integrate, as I said, environmental and economic value creation by shifting the logic from linear model, the one you have on your left, where you have that basically value creation and delivery just means and comes from the use of virgin raw materials, which are converted into new products. Value delivery just means selling products, and value capture is of course what you get from selling products associated with your sales revenues. So as I said, it has to shift from a linear model to a model where you generate a continual flow of reused, remanufactured, recycled materials and products over time, and you capitalize on the value embedded in used products as well. So on the right, you have a model where you have what we call the extended value proposition, but this means that value is recreated, for example, when the products are used, as I said, repaired, remanufactured, recycled materials are used for the new products, and at the same time, value delivered is because you are used, upgraded, or remanufactured products as well. So it's in terms of offering of products and services which allow you to have, as I said, a flow of new revenues, and of course this the extended value proposition could be unified also in form of a longer product life, more sustainable products, lower price of reused and repaired products or recycled products, and also in terms of new types of models. In the next slide, please, we can see lots of different models which have been studied in the literature. As I told you, there is a huge literature on this. Of course, we do not have time to go through that, but I just wanted to focus on the three main stages of circular business models. You have in this big picture to the right the idea of closed loop strategies of circular economy, and then you have different types of business models which have been implemented. We will have time to go through some of them today. And finally, the application to circular construction. But here I wanted to focus on the three main stages of circular business, because as I told you before, the innovation has to influence all stages of production. For example, circular procurement, what do we need? We need here to reduce ecological footprint in the production inputs. We have to increase the use, for example, of used production inputs up or downside. We have to reduce the ecological footprint in production infrastructures. So we have also to increase production of used infrastructure and purchase infrastructure with a long product life. More generally, we have to increase the lifespan of production infrastructure in terms of repair, maintenance, and so on, and also reselling used infrastructure, if possible. I wrote circular design models, and in particular, this would be very important for construction sector in terms of extending product life, facilitating repair during use, facilitating product updates and upgrades, facilitating recycling after use, and more generally, of course, thinking of materials and also strategies in terms of energy consumption, air or noise pollution, which reduce pollution in product use. Then I wrote a circular internal production process, and here again we have to think in terms of material use, but also in terms of using waste, for example. So you have to think of reducing material use in production, in terms of increasing also the share of renewable energy production, in terms of reducing pollution in all the production processes, in terms of reusing waste products and residual materials, and so on. And then circular after sales, after use models. Here we are thinking also of contracts where you extend the warranty or improve maintenance and repair services, improving access to spare parts, equipment, in terms of increasing the range of product updates and upgrades. And after user services, you have to think of possibilities of refunding of product returns, resale, upgrade of returned products. So you have to expand the services that you may have. And this allows you to think of different categories. Here you have a list of them. But in the next slide, we can focus more specifically, please, next slide, on the product service eco-design for customers, users. So these are basically some of the previous one I already listed, and you can see here more specifically, once you go to the construction sector, what this means in terms of extending product life. It means that you wanted to avoid planned obsolescence by design. So you can think in terms of modularity, and we will have some examples today about that. In terms of design for disassembly, in terms of also of industrialized manufacturers, products which are become very important because modular facade, for example, become important because the design here could be used in a different manufacturers, even though with different materials adapted, for example, for the different regional climate, but tailored to the different needs. For example, you will see in terms of insulation requirements, thermal requirements, and so on. At the same time, you may have, as I list here, also different types of contracts. But next slide, please. More specifically, what should be the kind of contracts that we can think of for social and affordable housing. These are mainly those based on service or performance or efficiency-based circular business models. And in particular, here I mention some of the important types of new way of thinking of contracts in terms of pay-per-service, where the provider is responsible for the cost of the product and still encourages to optimize the design of the product and service. Here, revenues is tied on the use of service in terms of periodic fees, for example, or there are also other contract arrangements. So it's pay per service, not so service becomes the relevant issue. Pay per performance, where the manufacturer keeps ownership of products and leases them to the client. And here again, revenues are tied to the performance of service and product. More generally, we have different types of contracts which go under the label servitization for energy retrofitting. These are more specific for energy use, but also more generally in terms of renting or sharing, where revenues are tied to the provision of a service or product during a certain pre-specified period of time. Leasing, where revenues are tied to access to a product, while there is always the purchase option, the purchase possibility, and pooling or shared ownership, if you want, in terms of another way of sharing services and having sharing platform which can be implemented in this context. Okay, very quickly, because time is running away, so I ask please to go to the next slide, where here you can see, for example, some sort of exercises that we did within our project, asking our partners to be specific on which phase of the cycle of production they implemented some of the new let's say new strategies in terms of use, repair, refurbishing, recycling, and so on, focusing both on cycling, extending, and dematerializing. And here I just mean essentially the standard strategies that we can think of, where cycling means materials and energies which are, for example, recycled in the system through these strategies which are listed here. Extending, as I said, has to do mostly with the characteristics of the product in terms of long-lasting products, upgradability, and so on, but also in terms of consumer education, because of course, if consumers do not play all together, it's much more difficult to put in the markets new products and services which are the characteristics I just said. So we need also some training and consumer education in order to increase awareness to encourage the use of these products. And the dematerializing, which basically the resource loops describes the provision of product utility without hardware, through the substitution with the service and software solutions. So particular digitalization is of course here, and we tried to understand much better in our case studies with our industry partners in which phase of production they introduced these different strategies in terms of value proposition, value creation, delivery, and value capture, and which types of barriers they encountered. The next slide gives you a very quick summary of barriers and, on the contrary, benefits that could be implemented and could be experienced in the different processes. Of course, we have the answers.
Please, Electra, can I ask you to please wrap up your presentation?
Yeah, exactly. So here, of course, you will have much more description and explanation by our partners, so we can go quickly there. At the same time, and I'm closing quickly, please, next slide. What we did also in our next slide, please. What we also did in our project, we tried to provide some metrics of the degree of adoption of circularity, again focusing both on value proposition and also on the organization of value. So basically we focus on two different directions in terms of the intra-organizational perspective. and in terms of value network. So we basically provided some questions. We asked our partners to answer our questionnaire, and then we developed an analysis in order to be able to provide some metrics of the degree of circularity achieved. Again, bearing in mind that we wanted to study both, let's say, the business perspective in terms of value proposition, but also I would say the multi-business model, multi-shareholders view, in order to take into account also the network and the different players within the ecosystem in the organizational value. Again, you may have more information about that in our project. Next slide, please, which allows us to understand whether we can say that our companies are in transition toward the circularity, have a model which is still linear, or achieved the complete circularity structure from the beginning of its life. And here you have some examples of products and in particular some of our analysis which allowed us to take into account the different aspects of circularity that I mentioned before. Just to conclude, because time is running away, I ask you to go to next slide. In particular, here you will have two of the companies which are going to explain to you in a minute the achievements. So just in terms of a main takeaway for authorities, local authorities, mainly facilitator, professional, and occupants, we have to focus on, of course, circular materials, product service systems, the product characteristics, as I already said, but also in terms of sharing platform, different types of contracts, as we said as well, but also cooperation with customers, suppliers, and the whole circular business network, because our purpose would be to create more strong networks where we may share our services, products, and of course for that to build awareness, we need to create incentives, environmental, economic, and social incentives to build awareness in society. There are already very good practices and success stories, and now I wanted to stop here because we already have Drive Zero stories, successful stories, and in particular, Timbuk and Weber are these types of stories that you will listen shortly. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Elettra, for that detailed presentation. I have noticed some questions for you later on, so we'll come back to those. But just very quickly, we'd like to get a better sense of who you are in terms of the audience that we're reaching with this morning's event. So there's a short interactive poll. The questions, yes, should be appearing on your screen now. I think if you click on the screen, you should be able to answer. So I'll give you a second to click and give your reply. Okay, perhaps if we can give the answer to that first question. Okay, so we see we have a slight bias towards Western and Northern European countries, where Southern and Central and Eastern are slightly underrepresented. But if you think of the population dynamics within Europe, maybe that's not such an unusual distribution indeed to find. So on to the next question. So again, you can just click on your screen. So we're wondering which sector you represent or who you are. So are you representing public, social, or cooperative housing, for example? Are you representing a product or service supplier? Are you an architect or an engineer, an academic or researcher, or indeed none of the above, other? So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that question. Okay, maybe we can see the answer to that second question. Okay, so we have a strong bias again towards one sector, which is architecture and engineers. I guess this morning's topic is somewhat technical, and indeed it's good to see that we do have architects and engineers, because they kind of play the bridge, the linking role between the product provider, developer, and the actual final end user, which is the building owner and the tenants. And indeed, we have people from public, social, and academics. And on to the final question, I think. And again, this is a question about your own personal day-to-day life. So not the company or the organization you represent, but just you as an individual. And some of the ways, so this is multiple choice. You can click as many as you want. And the idea is just in your day-to-day life, how you may be living a more circular lifestyle. So for example, are you buying secondhand clothing? Are you recycling, as you should be, paper, plastics, and metals, and so on? Are you composting organic waste, either at home or at the municipal level? Are you, for example, reusing coffee mugs, water bottles, all the things that kind of avoid that very small waste that we generate? And are you using renewable forms of energy, either at home or in your office? So again, you can pick as many options as you want. Okay, maybe we can have the answer to that question as well. Okay, so indeed, not surprisingly, people on this call are relatively sustainable and circular in their day-to-day activities. The one that I see there, which is interesting, which is maybe a bit further down, only about 38% of you are using already renewable forms of energy in your home or office. So clearly that's something that even amongst this cohort, which is perhaps more circular than the average member of the population, there's still room for improvement in terms of the energy consumption that we have within our homes. Okay, so now that we know a little bit more about who you are and who you represent, and also what you're doing to be more sustainable, we can move on to the next section of our event this morning, where we're going to hear from two people who are representing the Estonian partners within the project. So first off, we're going to hear from Targo Kalimes, who is Professor of Building Physics at Tallinn University of Technology, TalTech, who's going to discuss some of the pains and gains of using circular solutions in apartment associations. So Targo, the floor is yours.
Yes, you see, and hopefully you also hear me. And this presentation is about using circular renovation solutions in renovation of an apartment building. This is an example from Drive Zero project, where we renovated several projects by using circular renovation principles. Next slide, please. And here we can see this pilot building. This is a three-story apartment building which has 24 apartments. It was constructed 1986, and the energy performance certificate was from class D before renovation, and it was renovated to a nearly zero energy building, which is class A. So the building fulfilled European Commission energy performance targets before renovation, but basically this is not enough to reach decarbonized building stock. Next slide, please. And we used prefabricated offsite renovation for this circular renovation. We may say that this prefabricated renovation is the key to achieve circular renovation. We used insulation elements that were produced in factory conditions and installed on site. We used triple glazed new windows. There is a balanced ventilation with efficient ventilation heat recovery and efficient district heating to provide heat for room heating. And there are PV panels on the roof. Next slide, please. And after the renovation, the building looked like this. And on the next slide, you can see that on the top, next slide, please. On the top of the roof, there are also PV panels. When we designed the circular renovation solutions, yes, next slide. Then we assessed the circularity, and we used several criteria. We analyzed the type of connection, we analyzed the accessibility of connections, we analyzed different building envelope material or component crossing, and we analyzed where the material is coming from. And basically, we may say that the high level of circularity was achieved. Next, please. Because there were not too many crossings, and connections were very circular. Next, please. And we analyzed also the prefabricated insulation element, and we compared this solution with common external thermal insulation system. And we may say that the prefabricated insulation element with mineral wool, wind barrier, and wooden facade had the lowest embodied energy and embodied CO2. Next, please. And in following, I will show you some circular components that we used in this building. And these are divided into different classes. We analyzed added materials to the renovated building. Here is one example. One example is finger joint timber. When we produce timber frame elements, we will have a lot of materials that we can use as enough length timber. But by using this timber join solution, we can glue them together and use a longer timber. Next, please. Then another solution is that we can use recycled material, and we used for attic insulation, blown insulation. It could be mineral wool or cellulose insulation, but basically using this recycled material minimize the need for new mining. Next, please. Then we installed prototype for insulation element, and we removed the element after the testing period, and we opened the timber frame element, and we checked out how much material we can use later to install them into the new insulation element. And we may say basically that about 2/3 of materials were possible to use after removing the insulation element. Next, please. And also some of the windows were used in practice. Old windows in Estonian cold climate are usually double windows, but this is not enough to achieve to minimize the heat loss. And nowadays the triple glazing is a common solution. But what to do with these old windows? And in our case, we used these windows for buildings where which have no energy performance requirements, some summer cottages or so on. And basically, if we think what kind of pains apartment building association has, then in practice, we don't have today material bank where the apartment association can give these windows. But hopefully this will be in future. Next, please. And we also used old roof covering materials in some other buildings. One old farmhouse got new roof from this renovated building, and also one storage area, storage facility got a new roof. And basically, we can classify this as reuse of existing materials from this renovated building in another building. Next, please. And let's move now to the building service systems. Installing ventilation pipes to the insulation element gives a lot of flexibility to apartment building and minimize the space need for the service systems. But here is a question. If we have a shorter service life for service systems compared to the insulation element, then how we can change them if the change is needed? But together with Timbeko, we developed several solutions which we can use when we have to replace these service systems.
Sorry, Taco, can I ask you just to begin finishing up your presentation?
Yes. Next slide is last slide. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Taco. You were perfectly on time in the end. So thank you, very interesting. So we're staying in Estonia. We're moving from Taltech to Timbeko. We're going to speak with Ergo Niguman, who's a project manager at Timbeko, and he's going to talk about the circular business model that they used in the Estonian case. So Ergo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tara. And hello, everybody. My name is Eero, and I am a project manager at Timbeko. And I was responsible for the construction and design phase of the Estonian demo project. Our product and service in this demo project was basically one-stop shop for the apartment building, where we did from the architectural design to construction work and paperwork and everything in between. Also designed all the HVAC, electricity and plumbing, and of course designed and prefabricated the timber framed insulation panels. The product was developed so that it would have a lower carbon footprint compared to, let's say, ETIC system with the mineral wool. The carbon footprint of our solution is about 20% lower. And during this Drive Zero project, our company has also gained one or actually two new standards. One of them is ISO 14001, which is environmental management standard. We also did reusing materials from the site or urban mining, which also Targo briefly mentioned. And in addition to the roof cover material reusing on other projects, we, for example, reused the radiators from the building. We cleaned them and repainted them and reinstalled them in the same building in the stairwells. This was just to test if it's if it's possible, and how difficult it is to reuse them, and it was actually quite simple and worked quite well. We also did some reusing of the concrete that we demolished the plinth pavement around the house. We demolished it, crushed it, and the crushed stone was used to make new concrete. For pain relievers, the installation process is on site. It's a lot shorter or quicker, but on the other hand, the design phase is a little bit more time consuming. For example, the design phase of the timber frame panels or insulation panels was 14 weeks. Installing of the load-bearing steel corners and installing the base timber was for the whole house 2 weeks, and installing the timber frame insulation panels was altogether 8 weeks with demolition works and also removing the old windows. The deep renovation contract altogether was 9 months. It was at the beginning it was planned to be 6 months, but the delay was caused by unforeseen events and also the results of COVID pandemic. For example, the ventilation units delivery time was delayed 2 months, and there was quite a lot of other works that needed to be done after the installation of the ventilation units. The procurement of design and construction work can be done with the same procurement, and in this case the price indication can be done before any design work has been done, so that there wouldn't be any costs for the apartment building, and the design solution would be according to budget. And this results in fewer procurement processes. Otherwise, you would have to make a procurement for design phase, then another procurement for the construction process. And for the game creators, the scaffoldless installation of insulation panels. The installation was done with boom lifts and crane. The residents did not have to live behind closed scaffolding. When I discussed with another company that uses or does these renovations on day-to-day basis, they said that during that time, because we also had a little bit of shortage of labor force, then they said that the scaffolding would have been around the house. If they would have done at the same time the same renovation, the scaffolding would have been around the house for about 1 year. Also, one of the game creators would be better quality through works in controlled environment and design for disassembly, which I will talk about in the next slides. The better quality through work in controlled environment, which is in factory, and with this we have this basically proven product quality through different certificates. For example, the ISO 9001, which is management quality system, ISO 14001, which is environmental management, and ISO 45001, which is occupational health and safety standard. We also have SINTEF standardization and ETA standard. And one of the game creators would be closing the old balconies with timber frame panels. On the existing building, they used to have balconies on the north side of the building, and we closed them so that they would get bigger kitchens. So each apartment gained about 5.2 to 6.7 square meters, depending on the apartment. And for the whole apartment building, it was 134 square meters of increased net area. We also did mapping and legalizing of the changes made inside apartments before the renovation. And we also as I said before, designed for disassembly. So the insulation panels were designed so that they could be disassembled and also reassembled in some other location or on the same plot if, let's say, the apartment building goes to demolition. And we made the architectural designs from these panels so that you can make either a 2-story apartment building or 3 2-story apartment buildings or 3 1-story row houses. And these are the visuals for from the architectural design. And this is the end result. And thank you for your attention. This is all from me.
Thank you very, very much. So we're a little bit behind schedule, so moving on quickly to our final speaker before we enter the panel discussion and the Q&A section. So indeed, if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please put those in the chat and we can get to them in the next section. So our final speaker is Bart Wortman, who is an innovation project coordinator at Weibo, which is again one of the partners in the Drive Zero project. So Bart, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dara. Good morning, everyone. And today I want to talk to you about Weibo. And Weibo is a subcontractor, and we produce wooden window frames and facade systems. And I want to show you some of the work that we do. This is the most famous building that we renovated. Maybe you know the dwelling. This is the Gare Maritime building in Brussels, and there we produced oak window frames and oak staircases. Another famous project that we did was a municipality building. This is an award-winning renovation, and we produced these 4,000 oak window frames. We also do some more normal stuff, like these facade systems for a hospital in the Netherlands. And most of the time we produce even more normal stuff. This is an example of a social housing association flats that we renovated with our facade system and with our wooden window frames. And we have been doing this for quite a long time. This is an example of a dwelling that we renovated in 2014, which was the first net zero renovation in the Netherlands. So for quite some time we have been active in the renovation wave with our products. And within the Drive Zero project, we asked ourselves the following question: how do we make our products more circular? And we got the following approach. We used 3 main lines of thinking. First one is urban mining. Second one is biomimicry. And for those who don't know, biomimicry is the art of looking at nature and copying interesting and good designs that nature uses and embedding them in your products. And the third and last one is the design for disassembly approach. So for the urban mining, we looked at the area of the building, and in the area a lot of roof purlins were available, and we used those as a base material to replace virgin material when producing our facade systems. We did that in a few steps. First, we measured quality. So you can think about, we checked any metals that are available. If there are metals available in the wood, you can think of nails, for example, and we had to get rid of them. But we also checked moisture level and so on and so on. From there, we started the process of sewing the purlines in the correct sizes that we can use, so we can use it for the facade systems that we produce. You can see that on the top right picture. And with the sawdust that that we produced with the sewing, we actually use it as a material, as a sub-material for the wood fiber insulation that we used. Some of the roof purlines that we sought, we treated thermically, so we enhanced the quality. and we can, after that treatment, we can use it as a cladding material, which you can see on the top bottom left picture. Regarding the biomimicry approach, we took inspiration from grasshoppers. As you might know, grasshoppers can endure quite a lot of heat, and they do that with the system in their skin, which ventilates quite well. So they have quite a lot of cavities which allow cool air to go in and hot air to escape. And we looked at the skin of the grasshopper, and we tried to replicate that in a facade system. So typically a facade is either non-ventilated or ventilated on element level. And what we tried to do with the cladding, which you saw earlier on the picture before, is we tried to put it on there so you create much more cavities on the whole facade system. And this is the open joint ventilation. And we replicated the skin of the grasshopper, and by doing this, we achieved much lower temperatures on the indoor quality. And we measured those temperatures. You can see the little red dots on the screen. Those were the placements of the measuring equipment, and on each of these levels we measured the temperature of the air, and we achieved a quite substantial lowering of temperatures by using the open joint insulation, by taking inspiration of the grasshopper. And the third and last approach that we used is we, as well as Tim Becko, used the design of disassembly approach, and we did it in 3 ways. The first one, we used hook systems instead of a bolt system for attaching our facade systems to the existing structure. You can see that on the top picture. We used bolt connections to attach virgin wood to reclaimed wood, so we can use virgin wood and reclaimed wood together in one product, which comes in handy if you don't have the right reclaimed wood available and you still want to make a product. And we used for the cladding system hook system instead of a nail system, and I have a picture of it right here. This is the old way of attaching, typical old way of attaching cladding to a facade system. And within the Drive Zero project, we use a hook system, and a big advantage of this is that each individual piece of cladding can be taken out. If you want to do service, or if you want to have a look inside of the facade, it's no problem at all. You can detach every single piece on its own. So this is the approach that we took for design for disassembly, which offers a lot of gains and offers also a lot of pain relievers. On the detachability, the best gain is you achieve a higher value of components at the end of life, because you can deassemble them more easily, and the quality of the materials at the end of life is also better, because the demolition process is not as it's more detachable, so you have a lot more value on each kilogram of material that you get out. On the biomimicry, you can create better living conditions for the occupants inside of the building. And for urban mining, it provides a lot of local job opportunities, because as you already saw before, using reclaimed wood takes a lot of extra steps, and these steps can all be carried out locally and can be done by, for example, by people who have a distance to the job market. So this is also a big opportunity, a big social opportunity for urban mining, and basically these gains help us going from the old situation like this to hopefully a new situation here. And my last point that I want to make is that if we prefabricate all these components, we can also come to faster retrofits. The picture that you're seeing right here is a social housing flat for students in the Netherlands. And we prefabricated all the facade systems, and I have a video in which I can show you the way that we attach the facade systems. And we can do in most scenarios, we can do one entire floor in 1 week. So we can do it quite fast, and this the speed of the retrofit is something that we need if we want to achieve our goals for 2050. With that being said, I want to show you some parts of a video that I hope will play. Let's skip ahead a little bit. On here you can see some parts of the craning being carried out. And what you can basically, you can see over here, you have a crane operator and you have somebody down below attaching the facade system to the crane, and you have 2 people inside of the building that do the complete assembly. So with only 4 people, you can do an entire floor within one week. And this is a speed that we really need to use. If we want to achieve the goals that we have set ourselves for 2050. With that being said, I would like to thank you for your attention. If we can get to the next screen. Well, I'm not able to, but I would like to nevertheless thank you for your attention, and I will get back the floor to Dara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bart. So I'd like to bring back in now all of the panelists we've already heard from for a quick and hopefully dynamic discussion. We have around 15 minutes left until the end of the session, so we'll try to get as much information covered as possible. I see a number of you have already asked questions in the chat, so I think maybe we'll take some of those questions now. One of the issues that we often hear from social housing providers when we're putting forward this proposal for them to be more circular, particularly making use of repurposed and reconditioned materials, windows, doors, roofs, whatever it might be, is that there's a lack of certainty. And what I mean by that is that if you're designing a renovation, which maybe has 100 apartments or 200 apartments, you need to have certainty about the availability of windows and doors when you're designing the process and so on. So one of the things I'd like to know, maybe from some of the partners from Estonia who mentioned the fact that they had used reused windows, for example, and so on, is how do you plan a project that relies heavily on the availability of a certain number of these kind of components like windows and doors? How does that work versus a more traditional renovation project?
Regarding the reused, let's say, windows, it is so let's say they used to have also this standardized window measurements, but the deviation is a lot higher than it is today. But what we did was we tried to remove every window so that it would be intact and it doesn't break, and we just offered them to different companies, different people. Some of the windows were given back to the apartment owners so that they can take it to their, let's say, summer house, or somebody they know that could use this type of windows, or maybe they're building a, let's say, a shed, or let's say this a little extra cabin on their plot or something like that, and so that they can design their product or their building with already this window. But other than that, it's quite difficult. Let's say for the radiators, we didn't know in what shape they are until the moment that we take it away, so that in that moment, I can see if it's let's say clogged or maybe it's too rusted, so that it wouldn't be even reusable. But luckily for us, it was quite okay shape.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is for Aletra. So you mentioned a lot in your presentation this kind of concept, what's often called products as a service. So you as the building owner, you effectively rent the components within the building. It could be facades, it could be internal components, it could be lights, whatever it might be. One of the potential limitations of this approach is that we would expect the lifetime of a building to be minimum 50 years, maybe even up to 100 years or beyond. Which kinds of components within a building do you think are most suitable already for this kind of products as a service approach? And maybe some of the limitations, because of course, if you're renting from a company today, maybe that company doesn't exist 30 or 40 years down the road when you want to replace the component, and then you have some difficulties about giving the product back. So maybe you can discuss some of the potential limitations of this approach, and also what are the immediate opportunities you see?
Well, thank you for this question, which is a very complex question, because this has a lot to do also with the different types of legislation. You mentioned, for example, take back, and this is, of course, a problem, as you already said. In many cases, also in terms of leasing, or in any case, thinking of renting types of contracts. Once you talk about facades, of course, this has to do with the specific legislation of the countries. So this is something which has to be taken into account, I think, by authorities. I'm not talking about the local authorities, but national authorities, if this is considered something that should be pursued. From as far as other types of materials are concerned, we already had some examples as far as some inputs, some materials, and I think that a way that could be in any case improved from the point of view of the strategies is to think in terms of the use, for example, of sharing platforms, trying to increase and improve the networks among supply and customers. So think in terms of contracts that facilitate the interactions within, let's say, these networks. But I totally agree with you that once we talk about, in particular, facades, this, of course, comes, the legislation is problematic in some way. At the same time, also, once you think in terms of waste, the percentage of waste which is allowed in some cases is limited by specific legislations for the types of materials, which I mean that there should be awareness also from the point of view of legislator that if this is something which is considered to be important, they should provide some incentives toward this. And of course, in terms of the policy incentives, we can think also in terms of taxation of subsidies to reduce the current difficulties.
Perfect, thank you. So take another question from the chat, and I guess this is both for Bart and indeed for the colleagues from Estonia, and it's about the modular build component. So you mentioned, both of you, the idea of building off site and then basically fitting them on site. But the question is, does that same technique work if, as part of the project, you also want to extend the building? So for example, if you have an old multi-family building and you want to add a new kind of balcony or a new kind of outside space, does the same off-site modular build technique work, or does that complicate things too much?
Thank you for the question, Eero from Tiveco. Yes, it does work. On my presentation, I said that we closed the north side balconies, but we also added new balconies on the south side that we installed on site. But it would be also possible to, let's say, extend the building on, maybe on side or on top. We also discussed if it's possible to extend the building with adding a new floor, fourth floor, but it wasn't possible due to municipality regulations, and also the building next door would, on the first floor apartments, they wouldn't wouldn't have gotten enough sunlight because the fourth floor would have shaded it.
Perfect. I don't know, Bart, do you want to maybe say a few words on that as well? I don't know if Bart is still with us. Hopefully so, but we can come back to him in a moment, perhaps. If I can go quickly to Cecilia. So you obviously have a very high-level overview of the project. You know all of the suppliers within the project quite well. I'm just wondering, from your point of view and the conversations you've had, a lot of the people who are providing these products, they're very innovative. They still remain quite niche, let's say, in most cases. But what is the main motivation of these suppliers? Do they really see this gap in the market and they're just very, very innovative in what they do? Or where is the kind of the drive from the products, from the producer's point of view, coming from to produce these more circular approaches?
What you mean in general? Sorry, can you please specify better your question, Dara? Sorry.
Sure. So if you look at the partners within Drive Zero, the ones who are like Team Beko, for example, or Weibo, who are providing these kind of products, having spoken to them, what seems to be their motivation for innovating in this way and really trying to become more circular? Because of course, this is still not the standard approach that most construction products providers are working to. So yeah, it's really about the motivations, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that in this kind of project, in this kind of research and innovation action project, is very important the work that all the different target groups are making, because we have different institutions, let's say research innovation institutions, for example, university, we have industries, and I think that the innovation that the industries are conducting, are researching for, is very is crucial for the activities of this project. So I think that Weibo and Team Beko today presented very important projects to be practically and feasibly applied to the different renovation case studies, and also all the work that all the other industries are conducting within the context of the Drive Zero project is very important in order to reach feasible and tangible results, outcomes for concretely actuating this transition to a linear to a circular renovation process. Both thinking about the economical aspect and also in relation to the environmental and construction aspects. So I think this is a very important work, and I think that I strongly believe in the cooperation between different institutions, on one side the industry sector, and on the other side the research and innovation made by the research institutions, so university, academics, and all the bodies involved in this field. So
perfect. So we have time for maybe one final question before we wrap up, or maybe two questions if we're quick. Next question is for Targo. So one issue with renovations is that the traditional sources of finance, maybe from banks, for example, there's a risk, because if you're lending for renovation, that lending is kind of unsecured, because the value of the home is the pre-renovation value, not the post-renovation value. So there is a risk for banks. In the Estonian case, I know that you have some ways of maybe de-risking this, or maybe helping apartment associations to renovate. Institutions like Credex, for example. I'm just wondering, could you speak a little bit how a typical renovation would be financed, and maybe what lessons Estonia could teach other countries? Don't know if Targo is still with us. I hope he is. Okay, in that case, we will, I guess, end the call. It's now just going up to 11:30, which is the time. So thanks to all of the panelists, thanks to Build Up, thanks to all the other partners who made this event possible. Thank you very, very much for your attendance. I know there were some technical issues this morning with the link and audio and so on, I see from the organizers, they've told me that keep an eye on your emails for this afternoon session if you're joining. They may be sending you an updated link. So yeah, the link you used to join this morning's call may not be the same as the one for this afternoon's call. Just giving you a quick overview of this afternoon. So we'll begin at 2 o'clock. The call will be a roundtable discussion between the European Commission, who will outline their vision for transition to a more circular residential building sector. We'll also hear from 4 social housing providers from the Netherlands, from France, from Belgium, and from Spain, who are already leading in terms of the transition to the circular economy, and they'll basically try to outline the current barriers and opportunities that they see within the sector. So thank you very, very much for your participation. Hopefully we'll see you again at 2 o'clock. And yes, with that, I close this part of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dara. A big thank you to all the speakers and also to the audience for attending to the webinar. Deeply sorry for the technical issues experienced during the recorder, and thank you very much for your interest and resilience to follow our indications online. A reminder, as Dara said, that we will have the session this afternoon at 2 Brussels time. You will also find the recording to this build-up in the build-up portal to this and all the webinars on the series, also in our YouTube channel in the coming days, maybe tomorrow, together with the slides. And thank you for now and goodbye.